reference sources LS500. This will be the lecture on the reference sources. First, let's see what the definition of a reference source is. Of course, in this case, we're talking about the traditional reference sources, especially printed materials. But it will apply also to electronic materials too. A definition: any publication from which authoritative information, and this is the key words. I have the keywords, what I regard as the keywords, in yellow. So publication, authoritative information, and I have talked several times about the importance of having reliable information, can be obtained including but not limited to reference books, catalog records, printed indexes, and abstracting services and bibliographic database. That's why I said at the beginning that it was more on traditional reference sources, printed reference sources, but in my opinion also applies to electronic reference sources. Okay, the main to me, the key word here, the main term of this definition is that it has to come from an authoritative source. Okay, because reference sources have to be reliable. If you remember in my other lecture about misinformation and disinformation, I mentioned that we as professionals have to supply reliable information. Why? Because we don't want to do misinformation. That's why we are reference librarians. Introduction. What a reference source provides. First, background information. Secondly, facts or specific details on a subject or a topic. And thirdly, which is very important for us as professionals, it points to other sources of information. Okay, so these three things are what the reference source provides to us as librarians and to the patron as the information seeker. More definitions on reference sources. They are designed, or characteristics, we can say definitions or characteristics. They are designed to be consulted rather than for reading. In other words, you're not going to take a reference source such as a dictionary and read from page 1 to the last page. You could do that. You're welcome to do that. Actually, I know somebody who had done it. But the idea is that you're not going to read the whole dictionary. The idea is that you are going to locate the information that you need. The same thing with the directories or encyclopedias. That's how it is designed. Then the content, in terms of the content, you will find facts and figures. It has concise information to FAQs. Contain valuable information for particular subject areas or topics. So it's very precise. The information that you will find there is very precise. It guides to information. In other words, it will guide you to other information sources. It points to other information sources. And in general terms, what it is being traditional in libraries is that reference sources are not for circulation. In other words, no one will take them out of the library. Of course, we are talking about printed reference sources. If you remember, when we explore electronic reference sources, of course they don't have to circulate, because you have access to them remotely from your own computer to the electronic version of Britannic Encyclopedia, for example. So this slide, of course, refers to the traditionally traditional printed reference sources. Using reference sources, highlight specific aspects of a topic. For example, encyclopedias and dictionaries. There are also biographical dictionaries that highlight specific facts in the life of famous people. Provide reference to information already gathered, subject bibliographies. And they are very useful because they point to other information sources that are maybe books or journal articles. And it will provide statistics and facts, and we have the almanacs or yearbooks. So these are 3 examples. Types of reference sources, and this is very, very important. Direct. It is not necessary to consult another source. It is a terminal source. Direct and terminal source here are synonyms. For example, if you consult a dictionary or an encyclopedia or a manual, it doesn't point you to another source. It might, because you may go to the reference list. But in general, if you're doing a reference transaction, you're supposed to end there. Of course, if the information seeker needs more information, then you have to go to other sources. But then what it means is this is not a regular general transaction, but it may be more like a research reference transaction. Indirect, it is a guide to locate other sources. And here we have abstracts, we have bibliographies, we have concordances, and of course we have indexes. Okay, these are indirect reference sources because they point to other resources or to other information sources. Finding reference sources. Where do we find reference sources? Of course, in the library catalog, in the electronic databases that we have available, for example, in our website, at the university website. You can browse the reference shelves, use a guide to reference books, use an online guide to web reference sources. There are many open, public access reference sources, such as, and it has been mentioned many times in class, Wikipedia, for example, which I regard as a very good resource to start a search. But it shouldn't be the terminal source. And of course, another way to find a reference source is to ask the reference librarian. And here are some examples of reference source. These are the traditional reference source: the Almanac, the Yearbook, the Atlas, the Gazetteer, the Guidebook, the Bibliography, the Concordance, the Directory, Encyclopedia, Handbook, Manual, Dictionary. And in dictionary we have several types of dictionary: unabridged, full size, average, shortened, historical, specialized, subject, foreign language. These are some examples of reference sources, and I'm going to show you now those reference sources. Of course, these are only pictures or figures, or so it's better for you to go to the library and get yourself familiar with the reference sources. In today's information environment, if we have an internet connection, we will be using digital or electronic reference sources. But in the past, the reference sources were all printed. Here we have an example of an almanac, a yearbook, or a handbook. Here are the definitions of a yearbook, almanac, yearbook, and handbook. I'm not going to read this. This presentation is in the site, so you can see the presentation by yourself, and you can read the definitions of what an almanac, a yearbook, and a handbook is. Here we have some biographical sources. We have 3 examples here. One is, by the way, this one is an electronic source. The other ones are printed biographical sources. Here are the definitions, are the definition of a biographical source. An atlas. It's very important, and I remember, and I still do love atlases because I like maps and I like geography. So atlases are a very good reference source if you want to see the world, if you want to see maps of the world. Again, this is an example of a printed atlas, but nowadays, of course, you can find them online. The gazetteer. And here is the gazetteer of the world, and here is a definition of what a gazetteer is, and it's a geographical index or dictionary. A guidebook is the next one, and of course, if we are going to travel to any big city here in the US or in a foreign country, it's always a great idea to have a guide. Because it provides a lot of useful information, where to sleep, where to eat, how to get from one place to another. So a guide, it's very important, and they may come in electronic version. However, and I think this is still true, it's better to have a printed guide with you in your briefcase, in your backpack, whatever. If you're going to travel to a foreign country, or even if you're going to visit New York or San Francisco here in the States, it's better to carry a printed guide. You may use your smartphone too, but a printed guide, I think, is more useful and easier to use in the field when you are out in the field. Bibliographies are very important because you have citations either on an author or on a subject. So bibliographies are very useful, but remember, they are not terminal reference sources. They are indirect reference sources because they point you to another source. Concordance, very important too, and here's a definition, and here is a picture of a concordance. Directories, of course, are very important, and the problem with printed directories is that they get outdated too soon. So I recommend to have access to electronic directories because they are supposed to be updated constantly. But when you have a publication, it takes longer to be updated. So they are not current. And if we give information that it's not current, we are misinforming our patron. Encyclopedias, and here is an example of the one is in the social science research methods, and the other is the one very well known encyclopedia, the Encyclopedia Britannica. And who didn't want to have an Encyclopedia Britannica when you were a child? I always wanted one, but they were very, very expensive. I was sad to know that now the Encyclopedia Britannica is only offered in electronic version. And actually we have access to the Encyclopedia Britannica online. Here is the definition of the encyclopedia. The encyclopedia went from being printed to CD-ROMs, and now it's all online. Manuals, of course, are very important if you want to carry out anything with your to fix something, to fix your car, etc., etc. So manuals are very important if you if you want to know how to do an operation in your computer, or how to use your computer, or a camera, or a new DVD player, or you need a manual. Sometimes they don't even print the manuals anymore to save some money, but in most cases you can download a manual if you need one. Of course, just like the encyclopedia, the other great traditional reference source is a dictionary. And the dictionary, there are many types of dictionary. Here we have 4, 5, 6 different types of dictionary. And again, they are very useful. We have in every language there is a dictionary. Of course, there is dictionaries in foreign language that you can find the definition in several languages, for example, from Spanish to English or English to Spanish. And nowadays, of course, we have online dictionaries. So, and here's the definition of the dictionary. Again, I think it is very important that we become familiar with the traditional reference sources, even though we may not use them as much as we used them in the past, but still we want to know what they are. Nowadays, in our information or informational environment, of course, we use more electronic resources, online resources. My advice is that whichever we're going to use, either printed or online resources, we have to make sure that they are from a authoritative source, because we're looking for reliable sources of information. Thank you.